Welcome to TheKillFile, your favorite true crime podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Spears. Each week, we will explore the dark corners of true crime, unsolved mysteries, and murder. Join me as we uncover secrets, investigate evidence, and dive into the chilling details of some of the most fascinating cases. Get ready for a journey into the dark unknown because, in TheKillFile, nothing stays buried forever. Hello there, and welcome to episode 92 of TheKillFile. I'm so glad that you guys are back for another story. Before we jump into today's case, a few quick reminders. First off, please take a second to rate, review, subscribe, or follow, whichever your app would like, to get the newest episodes every Monday. And this will also help to support the podcast in a free and easy way so other people can find us and join us as well. Thank you for taking that moment to do that for me. I am truly grateful for each and every one of you. I would not be doing this if you guys weren't here with me. Next, take a second to check out TheKillFile's website at TheKillFile.com, where you can learn more about me if you're interested and how the podcast got started. You can suggest a case you want me to cover, or you can fill out the listener files form and share your own true crime story for a chance for it to be read on the hidden files. While you're there, you can also find the merch shop. Seriously, if you guys haven't taken a second to check it out, I suggest, even if it's just for fun, there are some really awesome true crime slogans and shirts on there that I personally love and definitely sport. Check it out if you have a minute, and you might just find something you love. Finally, the Hidden Files will be back shortly, but in the meantime, you can head over to Patreon to check out those episodes if you want to know what they're like, and if you're interested in the bonus content. The podcast covers things surrounding true crime, but they are still slightly different than our regular Monday episodes. They are still dark, still interesting, and still revolve usually around a death, but have a dash of history thrown in about things that I personally have no fucking clue about. For example, one episode is all about a Uruguayan flight where a group of teenage rugby players' plane crashes into the Andes Mountains and how some of them died and some of them survived. The tale is incredible and also has a little cannibalism in it. So not exactly true crime, but still so fucking fascinating. Another case that we cover is the London beer flood that killed people and how that happened and its outcome. On there is also all about the life of infamous gangster Al Capone. So not only is there a ton of different topics that I will cover, but they are in-depth and just as twisty, turny, and weird as our regular true crime cases that we love. I think my entire audience of this podcast would love the Hidden Files. And it's $3 a month. And while we wait for Spotify to figure their shit out so they can return on here, head over to Patreon to check them out. The bonus content helps support TheKillFile, and it will help me to continue to put out content that you guys love. And it also can help TheKillFile and the Hidden Files to get better and better, because one day I want to be able to hire someone to help me out, and that way I can get even more content put out to you guys. So let me know if you guys are interested in more from the Hidden Files, and when I can, and I will get those up running again on Spotify when they fix their stuff. Okay, that's it for business. Let's talk about today's case. Today's case is one I personally never heard of, but is about one of the most important subjects in America around the time, and it still rings true in our country today: race. Today, we are going to be talking about a serial killer named Joseph Paul Franklin. Trigger warnings for today are going to be murder, ignorance, and racism. Let's jump in. Today's case is keeping us right here in the United States, where the murders would begin in a decade that I personally love, the 70s. Ah, the 70s. Full of make love, not war, hippies, and different shades of green and brown. During this decade, the worst thing about it was the home decor, let's be honest. The gold everywhere. The wood paneling, gag me, it was the worst. That's just my opinion, and no offense. This time period was marked by not only ugly homes, but also inflation that was happening, with energy prices costing well above what they should, and because of the oil crisis in 1973, gas stations would see long lines of people waiting just to fill up their tank. When adjusted for inflation, the cost of gas per gallon would be roughly about what we would pay when it's about $3.50, which is what we're almost at right now, so it's a little rough for most of us. The citizens of America were really scared in the distrust of the government following the Nixon regime and the Watergate scandal. Disco was a huge part of people's lives in the 70s, and it was not just a music genre, but also a movement. People would dance with their bell-bottoms, their suits, and their polyester fabrics. While the entertainment area saw things like vinyl records and 8-track tapes, kids were given an enormous amount of freedom because, let's face it, parents didn't know better. America was about to enter, and slightly already was entering, their prime-time serial killer era, which was just not really known about yet, but it was already a growing threat. Which brings us to the biggest issue of the day, racism. Racism in the 70s for America was still an ever-present loom over a large portion of America's population, as the Black community were still fighting for their right to just be left alone, not abused, and seen as equal human beings in this country. The Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968 was signed into law designed to protect things like ethnicity, skin color, race, and even religion factoring into decisions. In 1974, it would be amended to add sex, which, thanks, women are still an afterthought, good lord. And in 1988, it would again be amended to protect people with disabilities and the status of people's families. This act was supposed to help ban acts of discrimination against people for various details about a person, and was put into place to try and help against refusing to allow certain groups of people or races, even communities, from being allowed to live where they would like. For example, this act was put into place as a legal way to try and keep apartment owners or homeowners from not renting to a specific race or skin color, or from them trying to provide any type of unequal services. Just my thought was maybe if they hiked rent for the Black community, but not the white, etc. Not only were there racial problems with housing in America during the 70s, but also in everyday life, such as public transportation. Even though the country was trying to head into integration, some people still had issues with combining races on or in anything. This is exactly how our serial killer of the day decided who he would victimize, and we will get there in a moment. During the time of the slayings, America's Black community was still struggling with lack of jobs for Black men and younger boys, desperately wanting to provide help or any aid they could to their families. God forbid someone wants to work. Geez, how dare them. Police brutality towards the Black community was a huge issue in America, as it has been since the beginning. Violence was not just common, but an everyday issue for so many people, and eventually, the response to the systemic brutality would be seen in the way of activists who tried to take people away from the violence and more towards the Black Power movement, which would celebrate culture and try to find representation in politics as well. Although the Jim Crow laws were now legally ended, as we all know, this didn't change people's minds about each other overnight, nor did it teach Americans how to treat each other with respect and acceptance. It was just a law changed. Racist practices were still seen as racism was still present socially and deeply rooted throughout the country. I think it's safe to say that this is still a problem in our country. However, I hope that it has gotten better since the 70s, but because I am a white person and I see my own privilege and don't understand what it's like to feel the way our Black brothers, sisters, others, and non-genders feel, I can't really comment on whether or not it has gotten better for our fellow citizens. All I know is that how we raise our children and the beliefs that we instill in them matter a lot for most of our lives. So let's hope that we are all teaching inclusion and that skin color is just a color and nothing more. There's many shades of all of the races, right? This brings us to our serial killer of the day, a Mr. Joseph Paul Franklin, and his horrible, disgusting actions. Let's go back to how this turd grew up and see if it gives us some insight. Keep in mind, when I choose these people, I usually only know the bare bones of a case. I know this guy's a serial killer, but I didn't know what he did, and then I kind of saw some hints of white supremacy, but still not knowing all of his crimes. So we're going to learn this together. Joseph Paul Franklin was born on April 13th, 1950. However, the name he was given at birth was, in fact, James Clayton Vaughn Jr. It was said that Franklin's home life from birth wasn't great. According to the Big Book of Serial Killers, Volume 2, Franklin's father was not only an alcoholic, but was also abusive towards his family. It was also stated that his father was arrested on 2 separate occasions for public intoxication as well. Sources say that his father would also abandon his family for different stints of time, ranging from a few days, weeks, and even months at a time. Franklin would describe his mother as a woman who was not only a perfectionist, but also someone who was strict as a mother figure, and to top it off, didn't really seem to care much about her own children. He would also say that their household never seemed to have enough food to feed everyone inside, and that because of the different combinations of problems at his home, he would therefore be behind developmentally compared to other children his own age, saying that he was nearly 10 years behind them all. That seems like a huge gap, and maybe something more is going on there other than what he's claimed, but I'm not a doctor or a psychiatrist, so what the fuck do I know? I'm just saying that 10 years is extremely behind, if that's even true. Franklin would eventually go on to enroll and attend Murphy High School, and during this time in his life, he would start to seek out different religions or ideologies. The first being Christianity, and after that, Nazism. As a teenager, Franklin joined an evangelical church group that was reportedly obsessed with cleanliness, to the point where Franklin would refuse to eat unless the dishes that he was going to use were washed right before the meal, and he even used newspapers to sit on a chair. Franklin would later have various memberships in racist groups that probably foreshadowed his later crimes, such as the Nationalist Socialist White People's Party, which was later quote-unquote rebranded to be the American Nazi Party, as well as holding a membership to the Ku Klux Klan as well. I can't help but wonder if groups like these prey on people like Franklin with shitty childhoods who were just looking for a place to belong or be accepted and who need someone to care about them, or if they're wanting to feel important, or if people like Franklin end up flocking to groups like these on their own. Either way, not great, and after an accident that would leave Franklin visually impaired, he would then drop out of high school. I tried to find out more details on what exactly happened, but it's not really known. The only things that are known is whatever happened to him caused some blindness in one eye, and although it is said that his mother took him to the hospital for that, I guess there was a follow-up surgery that was needed, which never took place. This eye injury would be the reason that Franklin didn't end up having to go into the military for the Vietnam War. This is also around the time that James Clayton Vaughn Jr. legally changed his name to Joseph Paul Franklin, I guess to honor Benjamin Franklin, and a man that I personally had never heard of and had to look up, someone named Paul Joseph Goebbels, who I guess was a German politician who, according to the PBS website, was someone who helped with the Nazis' murderous agenda and was also the leader of its propaganda. He was basically a big old piece of shit, and Franklin wanted to be just like him, I guess. In 1968, around Valentine's Day, Franklin would meet a 16-year-old girl named Bobby Louise Dorman, and after only 2 weeks of seeing each other, the couple got married. Franklin would have been around 18 years old, so just old enough to make stupid life choices, but thankfully this one would not last. After only 4 months of marriage, the couple would divorce. Bobby would go on to say that her husband changed after they got married, saying that there were at times a stark contrast in his personality, like quote-unquote night and day. His wife would later say that when they had first met, she thought Franklin was very gentle and he was seemingly so kind, telling his young wife that he wanted to take care of her. Bobby would allege that Franklin would start to beat her, just like his father had done to his mother and himself. She then stated at other times that she would find him bawling his eyes out for no apparent reason. Bobby would say, according to a People's Magazine article about the case written by James R. Gaines, quote, "Something was bothering him a lot, but he never told me what. He turned really cruel and violent. Several times he beat me so hard I was afraid he was going to kill me." End quote. Not long after the strange behavior started, Franklin would also start suffering from terrible headaches as well. The area where Franklin's family lived at the time was a small white section in a larger black community-driven area, and as this was the same year as the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968 was signed into law, the neighborhood was then integrated for the very first time. Bobby would later claim to have caught Franklin practicing his Nazi salute in the mirror a few times, as well as seeing that he had sewn a swastika onto his fucking work shirt, which is so gross. At this time, Franklin's sister Marilyn would explain that a friend of her brother's started bringing over material for Franklin to read that was all racist in nature, and it was her feelings that this older man was trying to convert her brother into something worse than he already was. Bobby, his ex-wife, would later comment that Franklin liked to fantasize that he was a Hell's Angel, wearing jeans and a biker-type jacket while carrying a knife. She then said he never actually owned a bike, though, and that Franklin loved to fantasize often. It was her feeling that Franklin just wanted somewhere to belong, which is kind of what we thought too. It also kind of gives that false sense of security or false sense that someone cares about you. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this in your life, but I personally have when I was younger, and I hung out at the same small bar to play pool where everyone knew me, and I felt this false sense of belonging. It's something that people like myself, who come from a broken family or experience trauma from a young age, we can easily get sucked into feeling like people care about you and you just want to be a part of something. Let me tell you that quote-unquote bar family, it's not real. And it usually ends up with a huge smack of reality in your face when you realize that those types of people, they only want you around because you're fun or funny or whatever. But when shit gets real, they won't be there. If any of you have experienced this type of belonging before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I think it happens to more of us than we realize. After his marriage to Bobby, according to the Register-Guard newspaper from Oregon in an article published in 1980 about Franklin, he was, I guess, married again at some point in his life, allegedly using an alias Jim Anthony Cooper. Franklin would actually end up using dozens of aliases over his lifetime before he was caught. Franklin met his second wife, a 17-year-old girl at the time, Anita, at an ice cream shop in Montgomery, Alabama. It was reported in the newspaper that the couple only dated a week before they got married, having hit the road to see Elvis Presley's grave, and when they got back, they had gotten married. Anita believed that Franklin was a plumber, which was a lie, and this marriage would only last about double the last one, so about 7 months. I guess Franklin had told Anita that he had to travel for work a bunch, but that's not what he was traveling for, and due to his long absences, the relationship became strained, which led to the couple divorcing. Also, I guess Anita had given birth to a baby girl who she named Lori Dawn in the summer of 1979. Over the next few years, Franklin would be arrested for things like carrying concealed weapons and was said to be involved in a few incidents that were racially motivated. Another sister of Franklin's talked about the passing of their mother happening in 1972. And when she died, no one knew where Franklin was or where he had been living, so he didn't receive the news, which I guess made for a weird encounter one day when he showed up at his mother's house asking if she was there, and the little boy who was now living there said that lady had died. Well, this was a surprise for Franklin, of course, so he ended up seeking out his other sister, Carolyn, who was living in Mobile, Alabama at the time. Carolyn had her own family now, and when Franklin went to visit, she would say that he was very different than he had been. She said when he showed up at her home for the visit, he was wearing a white karate outfit, which is fucking weird, but also that he was really mad at his sister for having a black housekeeper. Carolyn said they actually ended up getting into an argument about it, and she told him basically that he could fucking leave if he didn't like it. And he did, and she would never see the man again. What a fucking nutbag. After the news about his mother's death, Franklin would move to Atlanta, and this is where he ended up in some of those various white supremacy groups. While he was a part of the National States' Right Party, he would sell their publication called the Thunderbolt on the corners of the streets for a while. Franklin then moved to the Washington area, still, I guess, working on his karate, while he was working in an office building that also doubled as where he was living. One source said that Franklin earned a blue belt in karate while he was working on it. I don't know shit about karate, so maybe a blue belt is good. I know that karate is like some people's thing, and I'm not hating on it at all. I think it's great, but when I was reading that he fucking showed up in his karate outfit at his sister's, like, maybe he thought it was so impressive, all I could think of was, for any of my Friends fans out there, which personally is like my favorite show in the world, when Phoebe's brother is out on the balcony yelling and kicking in the air and stuff, and Monica goes to Phoebe, "What kind of karate is that?" And Phoebe's like, "No kind." That is all I could picture when I was reading about this turd and his fucking karate shit. And when you see the picture of this douchebag, you'll understand why. It's not that he was into karate, because I think martial arts are fucking cool, don't get me wrong. It's just the fact that he's a racist prick and thinks he's so cool in my mind. That makes me fucking laugh. Anyways, while Franklin was living in Washington, his sister Marilyn moved in with him for a bit and got to see up close and personal just how racist and scary her brother had become. She would comment on how if her brother saw a mixed-race couple, he would actually go up to them and tell them they were disgusting. Yeah, he was that guy. Sources said in 1976, on Labor Day, Franklin saw a black man and his white girlfriend in a car together, and he was so upset about it, he decided to follow them in his own car. After following them for about 10 miles, the car had gone down a dead-end street, where Franklin would then proceed to spray the couple in the face with mace. What in the actual fuck is wrong with this man? I hate these kinds of people. Like, mind your own fucking business. And what is that couple even doing to you? Nothing. So leave them alone and fuck right off. It's so ridiculous. Over the next 3 years, Franklin would wage war against anyone who didn't look like him or anyone he felt disgusted him enough to fucking kill in a flurry of white supremacist-fueled attacks. The first attack came on July 29th in 1977, as Franklin targeted a Jewish synagogue called Beth Shalom, located in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The building was obliterated in the attack, as the authorities could tell the explosion had been premeditated because they found wires leading from the building to a nearby motel that was only about 300 feet away. Thankfully, no one was killed in the attack, although the services had just shortly let out before the explosion. 1 month later, an interracial couple was shot on August 7th in the parking lot of East Town Mall, located in Madison, Wisconsin. Alphonse Manning Jr. was a 23-year-old black man with his girlfriend, 23-year-old white woman, Toni Schwen, when they were gunned down in the parking lot. I tried hard to find more details on this murder itself or more information about the victims, but I couldn't, and I'm so sorry. I wish that I knew more about these young people. The only other thing that I could find about the incident was why Franklin decided to kill them. According to isthmus.com, Franklin admitted that he had gone up to Wisconsin in the first place wanting to kill a judge who presided over a controversial case. A Judge Archie Simonson. I guess the case he presided over involved a few black men being acquitted of rape charges against a high school girl who just happened to be white. Franklin was just going to quote-unquote kill the bastard, but while he was in the parking lot of the mall, he saw a cop car at the same time that he had seen Alphonse and Toni. He later remarked that he thought he was about to be arrested. Quote, "So I figured right at the last minute, if I'm going to go to prison, I would send this N-word and white bitch to hell before I go." End quote. Now, I don't believe in any sort of afterlife, but in what world would you be sending this seemingly innocent couple to hell for dating, but you're a good person for killing them just because they had different shades of skin? Jesus fuck, the logic just isn't there, man. After killing the couple, Franklin fled. The next killing came on October 8th of the same year, so 1977, when Franklin decided to hang out behind a utility pole that had some tall grass near it at another synagogue, this time in Missouri, named Beth Shalom Knesset Israel, and try to kill some worshippers as they exited the building. He ended up killing one person named Gerald Gordon and wounding 2 others named Steve Goldman and William Ash. According to ABC News, there had been a bar mitzvah ending as guests were leaving, and these were the people that were shot at. It was stated in an article that Franklin just picked the synagogue out of the fucking yellow pages at random. According to an NPR article about the shooting, a young boy at the time named Ricky Kalina was just saying goodbye to his guests as they were leaving his bar mitzvah. Talking about Gordon, Ricky said that he fondly remembers that Gordon was always a jokester, so when he heard what sounded like popping fireworks and saw Gordon grab his stomach, Ricky thought that Gordon was just playing a joke, until his wife ran over to Ricky covered in blood, saying that her husband had just been shot. Gordon and his wife Sheila were leaving the celebration with their kids. This is the same as one of the other victims, Steve Goldman, when he too was shot. Goldman would say that he heard the popping noises and thought that he himself had been bitten by a bug at the same time. And he also thought that Gordon was joking until he fell. Goldman said he then grabbed Gordon's little girl and ducked for cover as the little girl was yelling out for her father. The other victim of the shooting, a 30-year-old man named William Ash, would actually lose his pinky finger in the shooting, as the NPR article stated, that his pinky finger actually got embedded in the man's hip when he was shot. Thankfully, this man would survive. The next attack would come along the following year in March of 1978. The target of the attack was a publisher of Hustler magazine, a Mr. Larry Flynt, and his lawyer Gene Reeves Jr., who, by the way, there's a whole other story and I think a movie when it comes to this Larry Flynt guy. I guess he was very controversial and was a huge advocate of the First Amendment. As they were walking into the courthouse, they were both shot at by what was described as a sniper, and this was in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Flynt was shot in the stomach, which caused him to permanently be paralyzed from the waist down, and Reeves was shot in the side, but as the bullet had gone through his arm first before hitting the area, after about a month in the hospital, he would make a full recovery. Franklin later confessed to this shooting, saying that he went after the publisher because one edition of Hustler had shown pictures of interracial sex. Boy, would this freak have a heart attack by looking at any porn website ever, right? On July 29th of the same year, Franklin hid behind a Pizza Hut in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which, if you recall, was the same city as the bombing that he failed at. Here, Franklin came across an interracial couple who had been dating for about 8 months, according to local3news.com. William Bryant Tatum, who was 20 years old, a black man, and his girlfriend, Nancy Diane Hilton, who at the time was 18 years old, had driven to a Pizza Hut after leaving the Martin Theater. Tatum had plans to marry his girlfriend, as he had told his mother. The couple hadn't been there to eat. Hilton actually worked there and had been chatting with her coworkers while her boyfriend needed to make a phone call. Tatum and Hilton were both shot outside of the Pizza Hut, and while sadly Tatum was killed in the shooting, Nancy Hilton would go on to make a recovery despite the fact that she had been shot with a 12-gauge shotgun. Later, Franklin confessed to the authorities, according to a Times Free Press article about the serial killer, that as soon as he saw them, he decided to follow them, as he claimed to be on a rampage to kill, quote, mixed racers. Almost an entire year later, Franklin would strike again, this time on July 12, 1979, when he would fire his gun through the window of a Taco Bell in Doraville, Georgia. The manager of the restaurant, named Harold Bruce McIver, who at the time had been 27 years old, was sadly killed. When Franklin finally would confess to this murder, he would give the reasoning that Harold, who was a black man, had been in close contact to a white female. The picture that I saw of Harold, he just looked like a sweet young man with a great smile. Sickening and so fucking hateful. How can you have this much hate in your heart all the time? Franklin then went on to shoot a civil rights activist named Vernon Jordan, who was shot on May 29, 1980. Jordan was exiting a car while he was in Fort Wayne, Indiana, when he was shot as he was being dropped off by a white woman named Martha Coleman at Jordan's hotel. The bullet was said to be from a .30-06 rifle, and yes, I had to look up how to say that because I don't know shit about firearms or guns. Jordan was hit in the back, and as the man would thankfully survive the attack, he would describe the fist-sized hole that had been left in his back from the shot. Jordan would say that it took about 5 operations just to remove all of the bullet fragments and to close up the wound. After about a year after the shooting, Franklin was identified and arrested for the attack. However, Franklin would be acquitted of the crime by a jury that was said to be all white. Although initially denying that he had anything to do with the shooting, he did later confess to it. That just goes to show you that not only does our system get it wrong, sometimes obviously, but also race fucking matters in some places, especially back then. Had he been rightfully convicted, lives could have been saved. Not blaming the jury because maybe the prosecution failed to prove without a reasonable doubt that this crime was indeed Franklin, but reports claimed that race was most likely a big factor. Just a few days after having shot Jordan, now on June 8th, 1980, Franklin would shoot 2 cousins aged only 13 and 14 to death, while the 2 were just walking to a 24-hour convenience store in Cincinnati, Ohio. When confessing to the crime, Franklin would admit that he was ultimately trying to start a race war, and while he was out hunting for interracial couples, he didn't find any, and instead came upon the 2 young boys just out walking together. It was said by sources that Franklin was cold, without emotion, as he was talking about the double murder. He was also said to have been perched up in a sniper position waiting, as he used a .44 caliber rifle. Both of the boys were black, of course, and it seems that this was the sole reason that Franklin took his racial hate out on 2 young boys simply for being born. What a fucking piece of shit. They were just fucking children. Jesus. The next attack came on the heels of that shooting in Cincinnati on June 15th. Franklin was waiting for targets to shoot as he was perched up, lying in wait to murder people as they came along. On this day, Franklin would see a black man named Arthur Smothers, who was in the company of a white woman named Kathleen McCullough. Sorry if I butchered that. According to the State of Ohio versus Joseph Paul Franklin court documents, Arthur and Kathleen had simply been walking across the Washington Street Bridge located in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, when he shot and killed them. According to an article about the shooting in the Gettysburg Times from 1998, the district attorney, David Tulowitzki, said that Franklin shot them randomly as he sat waiting on a hillside for the first couple that he thought fit his category of targets, which just happened to be Arthur and Kathleen. Arthur at the time of his murder was just 22 years old, and Kathleen only 16. The couple was rumored to have been talking about getting married. Another attack that was later linked to Franklin, as he was charged but never officially went to trial, would be the murder of 2 young men gunned down outside of a store, also in June of 1980. A 22-year-old man named Lawrence Reese and a 19-year-old young man named Leo Watkins were both killed in a shooting that took place outside of a store in Indianapolis. Franklin would later admit to the killings of 2 young women, hitchhikers, out of West Virginia on June 25th of 1980 as well. As he was making the confession as to why he decided to kill them, he would admit that one of the young women declared that she had a black boyfriend, and that was enough to take their life, I guess. Franklin would say, quote, "I decided to waste her," talking about the double murder. Sadly, in this case, there was a man who had been wrongly accused and convicted of the double murder, a man named Jacob Beard. Franklin's final 2 victims were 2 young black men who had been in the company of 2 younger white women, as all 4 were simply jogging near a park in Salt Lake City, Utah. Yeah, just jogging along, and he fucking kills them. David Martin and Ted Fields were jogging with the young women on August 20th, 1980, as Franklin shot and killed them both near Liberty Park in Salt Lake. Sources said that the boys and 2 girls were in the middle of crossing like an intersection that had been lit up pretty well as the first shot rang out and hit David. As Ted tried to help his friend and pull him out of the light into a darker area, presumably for more coverage, he was then shot as well. Sadly, after the first 2 shots took the young men down, they were repeatedly shot as they had both been lying on the ground. A woman who was close by, Mary Wilson, who happened to be a medical assistant, ran over to the young men and wanted to give them help or any kind of first aid that she could, but apparently it was no use. Franklin would be caught not for the crimes that he had been committing, but rather in Kentucky for traveling with a gun in his car. The authorities detained him, and after searching his car and finding further evidence, it was clear to them that he was possibly connected to some of the sniper shootings that had been happening across the country. The authorities also noted he had racist tattoos upon his body, which didn't really help his case. However, just one day after he was captured in Kentucky, he snuck out of a city hall window and fled, able to evade custody. Thankfully, he was only able to evade for about a month before he was found again, but even a month is a long time when someone like this is on the loose. Why didn't they handcuff his ass to the table, is what I want to know. It's not like this guy was guilty of, punching someone. This fucker straight up assassinated people all over the country. Handcuff him at all times, for fuck's sake. Franklin would be found and recaptured in Florida, although when he was found, he tried to deny that he was Franklin at all. One source stated that he actually tried to scrape the tattoos off of his skin. Yeah, that's the thing about tattoos, man. They identify you real quick. What a dumbass. My son actually just asked me this the other day, could you technically, peel your skin off to get the tattoos off you if you wanted to? I tried explaining that they're multiple layers deep, but technically, I guess you could cut a chunk of your skin out to remove one. I told him that you could get them laser removed if you really wanted them gone, though. And my son's 11. So finding out that this dumbass tried to scrape his tattoos off made me laugh, and I hope that shit hurt. I guess he was found in Florida, and this was according to the FBI's website about the case, because a blood bank worker contacted the FBI saying that a man that had come in matched Franklin's description. Over the next 20 years, Franklin would be charged with his various crimes because, of course, he didn't just confess in the beginning. In fact, for the murders of the cousins, Dante and Daryl, the crime went unsolved for 18 years. That poor family. In March of 1981, Franklin, during a conviction of violating civil rights for the murders of Fields and Martin, the 2 young men who were jogging, Franklin tried to attack the judge during that case. A few months later, in August of 81, Franklin would be found guilty for the murders of the 2 young men, and according to Desert News, the jury couldn't come to a unanimous decision about Franklin being put to death by firing squad, so instead he was sentenced to 2 life sentences. Why, though? I don't understand that at all. Fucking shoot his ass. He deserves it. Unless they think death is too easy and he should rot, but it seems to me that the thought of being put to death is at least scarier for most inmates because they fight like hell to get the death sentence overturned in their cases, and they beg to not be put on death row. So maybe killing them is the bigger punishment. For the trial of the murder of Gerald Gordon, if you guys remember, he was the one who was just leaving the bar mitzvah with his family. I guess during the trial, Franklin again tried to escape, but thankfully he didn't. And to top it off, he was handed the death penalty. Yes. Franklin claimed to have killed 20 people and ended up finally confessing to many of the murders he committed. While he was on death row, I guess Larry Flynt, the guy who was the publisher for Hustler that Franklin had shot and paralyzed, spoke out against him getting the death penalty, saying, quote, "A government that forbids killing among its citizens should not be in the business of killing people itself." End quote. Sorry, Larry, but I strongly disagree. Franklin was also described by a psychiatrist as a paranoid schizophrenic who wasn't fit to stand trial in the first place, but this was denied. In the end, while Franklin awaited his execution, he would, however, renounce his racist views and realize that we are all just human fucking beings. Ah, yes, I wonder if the fact that he came face to face with all sorts of ethnicities while he was in prison, knowing that any one of those motherfuckers could shank your racist ass, had anything to do with it. Franklin claimed that he truly did believe he was doing the work of God, and that some of his motivation he himself deemed illogical, and blamed it on his abusive upbringing. He further commented that interacting with black people in prison made him realize, quote, "They were people just like us." Ugh, that makes me so fucking mad. It took him being forced to interact with other races for him to realize this when that was the whole fucking point of integration, you ignorant fuck. As Franklin was set to be executed in the state of Missouri, there was some concern over the use of propofol, which is what they had currently been using to put people to death, and a stay of execution was placed on Franklin. The next day, though, the courts upheld the execution, and eventually, on November 20th in 2013, Joseph Paul Franklin was put to death by swallowing pentobarbital, which is considered a short-acting barbiturate, which can be fatal if taken in high doses. This was actually the first time the drug was used in an execution in the state of Missouri. It was said that Franklin, in the days that were leading up to his execution, remarked how sorry he was for his crimes, and he was no longer a racist. As if anyone fucking cares. And that, my friends, is the sickening, harrowing, and disturbing story of Joseph Paul Franklin, the racist, white supremacist, piece of shit serial killer who only targeted people who were different from himself. Ew, this guy is the fucking worst, right? I just can't believe that someone like this, who was just an asshole from the get-go, can go through all of this and be like willing to kill for his own beliefs, can just turn around one day and be like, oh, I don't believe in that anymore. I was wrong, and now I'm sorry. Like, what? It's one thing to be brought up racist and have a hard time, like, shaking those beliefs back then. Not that it was all right, but that is so completely different to be raised a certain way and dislike a certain race or type of persons, and then realize one day that, like, your family raised you wrong and that everything you were taught is untrue or whatever. And then you open up your heart and your mind and you be a better person. But to join these types of groups and organizations whose sole purpose is to just spread hate and separation and false information and cling so strongly to them enough to go out and actually fucking hunt people is just absolutely nuts and scary. During one of his killings, I believe it was for like the Gordon case, Franklin said something about needing to like rest his rifle against something by the utility pole or the phone pole or whatever. So as he was lying in wait, he had actually gone to the store and bought a fucking spike to drive into the pole to rest his rifle on so that he could more accurately shoot whoever came out of the damn synagogue. I mean, what? I just will never understand this way of thinking. I just can't hate this much, I guess. Maybe I just didn't grow up that way. Although Franklin's family wasn't mentioned to have been like beating any type of racist ideals into the children's head. And I mean, his sisters weren't racist. I didn't think that my own family was racist growing up in the least, but there was a remark that I will never forget from my mother, who said, as I dated my first black boyfriend in my youth, that she was fine with it all until one starts dating her daughter, which I never shook the term one, as if my boyfriend hadn't been a fucking human being or something. And my family definitely is liberal and not at all racist nowadays, so maybe even if your family doesn't come across as racist, there are still words used or thoughts put out there that can separate your race from another in more stealthy ways. Be careful what you say, I guess. Who knows, but the level this guy was on was just a whole other level for sure, and I'm glad he's dead. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed learning how even a giant piece of shit like this can become allegedly unracist, and I guess it gives us hope for the rest of them. Come on back next Monday where we will cover another case here on the Kill File where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye! Alright guys, that's going to do it for today. A few quick reminders before you go. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on your platform. It will help the podcast grow and other true crime lovers to find us. Also, check out the website, TheKillFile.com, where you can suggest a case, find our merch shop, and submit a listener file. Follow The Kill File on your favorite social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok. Of course, you can always subscribe on YouTube as well. Find all of the links for the socials on the website. Come back on Mondays wherever you get your podcast fix when we will cover another case on The Kill File where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye.